I'm Sam. Before I get started, I just want to say thank you specifically for having this conference here in Texas. As Sam Huston, I'm a kind of a famous person here. And when I go out to the bars, I never have to pay for a drink. Even last night when I went to hand her my card to open a tab, and she said, Sam Huston, I don't think we'll be needing this." So thank you very much for that. I'm also very excited and very honored to be here with these gentlemen talking to you about technology and how technology is shaping the world we live in. Certainly technology has been a theme that we've heard a lot over the last couple of days. It's come up again and again, and it really is having a huge impact on the lives we live every single day. And a lot of that is driven by the proliferation of connected devices. Deborah said yesterday there was a gentleman who had like 6 connected devices. Certainly we all have 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 different connected devices on us at every single time. And that constant sense of connectivity has really changed the way that we interact in the world. And there's a couple really tangible examples of how that happens. This is an example from the Mona Lisa. If you go to see the Mona Lisa now, what you'll see is a lot of people just taking pictures of the Mona Lisa. This is a pretty horrible example. You see a lot of it. You saw it when the Pope was inaugurated. And we're taking more and more photos. What's particularly interesting about this one is this is an old photo. If you took this photo now, it would actually be people taking pictures of themselves in front of the Mona Lisa. And that's because we live in this society where if you don't have a picture of it, it didn't happen. So at this point, I'd just like you all to take a picture of me up here and maybe tweet that out so that I can prove to my wife that I was actually here and this actually happened. If you could hashtag it with my name too, that would be great. Maybe I could be a trending topic for today. But really, you're starting to see how we are communicating in a different way. This is an example that I'm kind of passionate about, is this notion of emojis. How many of you use emojis pretty regularly in the way that you tweet? I get tweets now from friends and my sisters that comprise only of emoji, and I'm like, what?
What does this
I don't know. I don't really know what that means. I'm not sure how to respond to that. But this is just a great example of how technology is changing the way that we communicate with one another. And it's a pretty astounding fact when you look at some of the numbers and the number of images that we share every single day. There's like 10,000 photos uploaded to Instagram every single second. There's 400 million snaps sent a day in Snapchat. And so technology is really, really starting to have a fundamental impact on the way we interact with one another. But it's not just that. This proliferation of connected devices has had a huge impact on who we are and what's happening. And the interesting thing is not just the number of devices, it's the pervasive connectivity. And we're sitting now on the precipice of the post-device world where the device sort of disappears. I get to spend quite a bit of time at the MIT Media Lab, and at the lab, if you have a device, they kind of laugh at you. They're already in this post-device world where your washing machine sends a tweet to your television that your laundry is done, and then your television surfaces that message to you during the next commercial break so that you can go into the laundry room and move your clothes into the dryer. And this is the type of thing that we're moving into now, where everything is connected. We're truly at the point of the Internet of Things, and this has a real impact on the way that we structure our relationships with consumers, the way consumers structure their relationships with brands. It used to be that the world was this sort of an interface, and we really created these really complex, really cool type of science fiction interfaces. But really, it's about user experience and creating that constant sense and having that holistic view of everything that a consumer is doing. And that creates really cool opportunities for brands in the way that brands behave in that world. This is an example from the Minority Report. I got to spend a little time with John Underkoffler, who's like the guy who designed all that stuff in the Minority Report, and he's now since made this real through his company Oblong Labs, that you can actually do a lot of this stuff and surface brands in different ways. So I'm particularly honored to have these gentlemen here with me today. All of these guys play a particularly interesting role in technology. They're all interfacing with technology in a different way, and all the things they're doing are reshaping the way that we interact with the world around us. So we have Wes Barrow from Nomi. Nomi's a fantastic company, really changing that shopping experience. Tim Reis from Google, and really focus on the performance solutions and the strategy behind that. Donnie Keller from Xbox. Obviously, Xbox is doing some really, really particularly interesting things. And Mark Walker from NRG. So just getting into the questions, what I'm particularly interested in talking to these guys is really what are you doing within your companies that are reshaping the world we live in, and how's that happening? Start with you, Wes.
There's a lot going on with NoMeah. Yeah, so I mean, for people who don't know exactly what we do, we bring the Internet of Things to brick and mortar retail by putting in, Wi-Fi sensors, Bluetooth beacons, and then video cameras to kind of create like a hybrid traffic counting technology, but also what we call Omniture for the physical world, where you can start to tie up, if you think of these sensors being the in-store tag and then merging that with, the online tag, you can now get a full omni-channel view of the customer. And so, a lot of the customers that we're working with, we're helping to actually, get a really seamless understanding of how people, move throughout the buying cycle across all channels, across every device. So, it's a very, very fast-growing business. We're very excited to be down here to talk more about it.
What about you, Tim?
I think about our mission statement is still true to what we're trying to do in the world, which is to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. And when you think about that, something I've been talking about a lot over the last year that really resonates with what you were saying, Sam, is this notion of friction and reducing friction in consumer pathways, reducing friction in the way that we in the business manage our business. Some of these things you might have seen announced earlier this week at our conference in California are about that end of changing the world. But when we think about the mission of organizing and information, making it accessible, there are still frictions. Like Absolutely. We're really good at getting you information quickly.
Yep.
But something like Google Now is a good example of what's a higher order than getting you the right answer quickly. It's anticipating what question you should have asked. And things like Google Glass, which is clearly, a first-generation version of wearables, but the notion of wearables is recognizing that doing this and taking this out of my pocket is a friction. Unlocking my phone is a friction. Opening an app is a friction.
Absolutely.
And if I could do it just like that and do it in the stream of my life, those are the places we're experimenting and expanding these days.
And what are some of the challenges you're facing in that?
Well, there's certainly, I'm a strong believer that technology advances and then our constructs move in the wake of that. And I've said at a number of industry events, you can think about when we cloned Dolly the sheep, that everybody was like, booyah, we cloned a sheep, and then immediately went, oh, what does that mean? Like, how do we feel about the second sheep? Is it, would you eat the second sheep? Does the second sheep have all the rights that the first sheep had? We didn't even know to ask those questions until we were confronted with it. And put that in technological terms, social media evolved, and it was like, oh, I put all this stuff on Facebook, and then you went, oh, I have an interview, and I put all that stuff on Facebook. So we need to learn about that, and certainly in the world of pervasive technology and persistent technology, there are going to be questions we have to wrestle with around privacy, around appropriateness, around behaviors. And that's both as consumers, as technologists, and as marketers. What are the appropriate ways to talk? And certainly I've said a lot that in mobile, the device is this close to your face, so don't yell at me. You're already there. That's really going to tick me off.
Yeah.
So those, I think, are the challenges we face.
Yeah, absolutely. And Donnie, what about from an Xbox perspective?
Yeah, no, I think that was really well said. I like the point about friction. So obviously we're focused very much in the gaming and entertainment space. That's sort of our heritage in Xbox, but I think Connect is a really good example of how we're trying to remove technology. I was talking to a number of folks over the last day or two about a lot of the work that engineers are doing in the Xbox space is all about how do we create these pervasive experiences that are more personalized and are more connected and more social and more interactive, but how do we do that in a way where you can't feel the technology? I think all of us represent companies that have done plenty of innovation and brought that to market, but all too often you feel it when you're trying to interact with it. And you need to navigate it, and you need to learn a particular UI, and you have to download an app, and then you have to learn that app, and that's different by platform. And so we're really focused on how do we create and deliver all those experiences in a way that anyone can just walk up, it recognizes you, it knows your preferences, and it knows how you want to interact with it, and it can evolve based on who you are and particular characteristics about you as an individual. To me, an exciting moment will be, again, just using an Xbox example, when you can have all of those Xbox experiences, but you won't see a Kinect device. It will be omnipresent, and you will have given it permission to engage and interact with you, and still have all of those really innovative experiences.
Absolutely, that's great.
Can I just make a plug for Xbox? Because
Please do.
if any of you are trying to reach my son, the only way you're going to do it is through Donnie's platform. I actually, tell him dinner's ready through the Xbox. That's the only way you're going to get his.
God love you.
Yeah.
And what about in terms of the greater home, Mark? Or what are you guys doing, and how are you reshaping the way that we interact with that specific part of our world?
Yeah, the primary focus of NRG, and it has been for some time now, is to provide energy to consumers, residents, as well as to businesses. The new mission, or the mission that our CEO has embarked upon is how do we create and deliver clean energy solutions to those consumers, businesses, and residents. NRG has 3 million customers throughout the United States. We're one of the largest utility electricity provider in the United States in the deregulated market. And one of the areas that we're looking at growing our business is figuring out how do we help people reduce their electricity usage in their home. And we believe that the way that we can help customers do that is through understanding the connectivity of their home through the multiple devices that they have, through their AC units, and how do we figure out how to turn devices off when needed, and how do we turn them on when needed. So the evolution that I actually see, or that we've all are interacting with, which I think is really going to get exciting from a marketer's perspective, is when your home knows you better than you know yourself. It knows when you're about to come home that maybe the AC all of a sudden turns on. When you walk into your house, the lights dim to the right. It can read who you are as well as adjust to the preferences that you might have. Those are the type of solutions that we're working towards at NRG, and those are the type of solutions that we feel are pretty much going to shape the next 10 years. And the amount of data that's going to be collected from that, in the interval data that you'll start receiving, every minute of your house of the electricity that's being used, is where it's going to actually get pretty exciting for us. And I think all of the companies that are up here are going to be interacting in some capacity in that.
Yeah, I think you bring up two interesting points. The first is the data question, and I think one is what is your data strategy now, and how do you see that changing moving forward, and is there a clear role for brands within that? Particularly what the household level data that each of you have and the individual level data that you have is particularly interesting.
Yeah, definitely. In regards to the data, I would say now more than ever, and everybody uses the term big data, but really your data strategy is going to be the foundation and the backbone of being able to enable you from a marketing perspective to be able to interact with customers, as I see in the next 5 to 7 years. If that foundation isn't built appropriately, where you're collecting information, understanding, able to analyze it, and be able to act upon it, or better yet, automate your customer and your user experience based off that data, I think that's where you're really going to start seeing the wheat from the chaff start separating from a marketing perspective. And that's going to be the foundation, and the amount of data points that are being collected, even in today's age, is almost overwhelming, and it's only growing exponentially over the next, I would say, 5 years.
So Wes, what kind of data are you guys offering to people interacting with Nomi, and how are you collecting that, and how is that impacting the way brands are coming to market in the store?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the biggest challenge we wanted to attack from day one, when we started the business about a year and 8 months ago, was we saw a plethora of data in the e-commerce world that was available, with Google Analytics and every other type of technology you could leverage. And that was informing a lot of growth, a lot of decisions that were never really possible in the brick and mortar store. And so one of our initial challenges was just to think about, all the types of data we could generate out of a brick and mortar shopping experience. And so we started to look at, traffic counting, just purely how many people walk into a space every day, how many people leave, POS data, how many people transact, interior sensors to pick up where in the store people are going and spending the most time and how frequently they're visiting. And then we started to even go a little bit deeper and start to embed marketing calendars as well as labor, things like that. So you could actually see, based on occupancy, how many people are in the store at any given point throughout the day to take on that foot traffic. And so as we started to think about it, we realized, wow, there is actually a lot of data that can be generated. Now what do you do with it? And so, part of what we offer as a platform today is really, it's a visual, it's a UI tool to be able to literally start to visualize, all this data across as many stores within a chain. But then it's also pulling out that data through APIs and things to actually let other brands leverage it too. So we're working with like grocery and with mall properties especially on the beacon front, which is the newest technology, to start to help them actually monetize that traffic and use it so that if you're an anchor store in a mall or if you're a CPG brand, you now want to leverage that in-store location data because it's more granular than anything you've ever had before with GPS or any other means possible. So now actually being able to target based on an end cap level of accuracy or a shelf level of accuracy is way more possible. And so that's where I think it's really heading. And so, we're really kind of that middleware in between the store and the brand marketer. So.
Interesting. So the other question is around that sort of openness. And do you guys see a time when you're all working together to create a nice cross-platform solution for some of the brands that we work with? I mean, I think that's like a huge question for us as advertisers.
One can always hope.
I know it's a little bit of a sticky question, but even at Xbox, you're doing some really interesting things cross-platform.
Yeah, way to pass the baton there. I think there will be an inflection point that will force a lot of the big, call it super platforms, to find some common ground. I think there's good examples in terms of standards and the IAB work that have driven some of that. But I think there'll be an inflection point at some point in the future that will drive more alignment there. I don't know exactly what that inflection point is, but there'll be a point when we can't grow on our own without partnering together.
Yep.
And end users will demand that, and marketers will demand that as well. And I think some of what Mark was talking about, and we spoke quite a bit this morning at breakfast, just about the connected world, and you kind of spoke about it earlier in the preamble, just about in the world where everything is connected, and there's all these connected devices, and they're generating just terabytes, petabytes of data, and now that can be stored and accessed in the cloud. The level of personalization, interactivity, socialization that will create, that will all have to come together at some level in sort of the stack to sort of enable and unearth and free up the next big opportunity. I think right now everyone's just trying to figure out what their data strategy is, get the right cloud infrastructure in place. There's a big battle going on with, in the cloud world. But it's what do you do with all that data? And I think people they're just trying to figure it out right now. But once we get a little more sophisticated with that, I think that's going to be an exciting point, and there'll be consolidation.
I think there's something, you make a good point about the kind of inevitability of it, and there's also precedent, right? Technology companies, technology media companies in particular, have a heritage of simultaneously competing, partnering, being vendors to or clients of each other, right? So there's some precedent for believing that we'll find our way there. The place that might be more difficult is cross-platform. Yeah. Not just cross-platform in digital platforms, because those we can get our arms around, but all due respect to the universe of television, I've got to believe they're going to look at that as something that they lose, that partnership of data is them losing ground.
Absolutely.
So that, not that we can't get there, but that's the holy grail. And that's, certainly you're all familiar with what we've been trying to do about getting that cross-device view. To the extent that we are able to get that digital data on television viewership and start to marry that into understanding a single user's behaviors, now not just using the digital desktop, laptop, tablet view, the mobile and geo view of that person. So now you know that they're entering stores and maybe marrying with third-party data and understanding how those purchases are happening. But now if we could understand the impact, the real impact of top of the funnel brand building advertising on that final decision and go from from I don't want to say seat of the pants, but an attempt at understanding the full flow and the value of all the components, to really having your arms around it and being able to align your budgets in a very meaningful way with how each component part of a very complicated psychological journey works.
And it's incredibly complex for us. That kind of understanding offers a lot of complexity. There's risk involved. So when do you think is the best time for brands to get involved? Is it early stage? Is it best to get in early stage? Is it late stage? What do you see from a Google perspective on when is it best to introduce brands into some of these opportunities?
You know, we're big believers in test and learn. So
yeah.
you know, those who you know, Jeremy and I were talking earlier about enhanced campaigns. There were those who said, I don't like this and I'm going to wait. You know?
Yeah.
And well, that's fine, but those who moved early, like those of you in this room who were guided by this company, you learned faster, you know? And so even if the learnings are imperfect, I would always encourage companies to start early, get familiar, understand as fast as you can, because that's the big and ongoing challenge these days, is things are moving very quickly, so your ability to learn fast is your strategic advantage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would say on the Xbox side, you know, the biggest influencers of our product strategy and the features and evolutions of capabilities that we bring forward are brands and agencies. And the work and the challenges that they put forth to us in terms of their marketing objectives and the types of experiences they're trying to create, those are the things that frankly test us more than anything that we're challenging ourselves to do inside the walls of the company. And often the most innovative things we create and many of the products are born from the things that our partners ask us to go and try to figure out from a technical perspective. So I say get in early, fail fast, be an influencer in what the future you want to see come to fruition. And if you're sitting on the sidelines, then you know it's difficult for you to have a credible position as a critic if you're not going to be a participant.
Yeah. One of the points that I would like to make, I do think, especially in this brave new world we're embarking upon with the level of personalization as well as the ability to identify who that person is. I think there has to be some concern around privacy, and taking that into some level of consideration in regards to the marketing tactics that we decide to do. It's one of the things that we've seen with the amount of data we're able to collect and the amount of data we're able to see in someone's home that has a smart meter device. We're very protective over how we use that data. Because we can see a consumer having a significant backlash towards us. So we're being very cautious in how we leverage that data to provide services to customers that are in a customized fashion. So I think that's one of the things as a marketer, either as an industry or individually as each individual brand has to take some level of consideration towards.
How important is that dialogue with the consumer for you guys, and how often are you kind of having those types of conversations?
What we try to do is we try to alpha test to get that initial feedback from the consumer. It's one of the things where we ask ourselves internally, okay, how could consumers perceive this level of data? A prime example of the products that we put out is we actually gave a measurement of electricity usage for your home in comparison to your neighbors. So the question came up, well, are you divulging my neighbor's information or my own information to my neighbors? So we had to figure out, how do we figure out statistically the mean of the neighborhood and how small of a sample do we need to leverage in order to show that data. So it went from everything from the zip code down to the zip plus 10, which, as you know, is a much smaller sample of the households, to could we just do the street or should we do the neighbor next to them, to the side of them? So we went through how granular should the information be, especially in a comparison, and we erred on the side of, you know, let's make sure that we're not divulging individual customer information to another customer in order to give people a perspective and a context of how they are performing against their neighbors.
Have you seen similar kind of concerns on the store level?
Early on, we did. You know, I would say now we don't nearly as much. You know, I think when it was a newer technology, you know, like 12 to 18 months ago, you know, we were getting a lot more questions around that. But I think now that people are kind of understanding what it means and what's possible, and that there's no PII or anything really being collected at all. You know, there's nothing except like an anonymous device, you know, identifier. You know, we don't really get those questions anymore. I think what's interesting though is we've actually had a lot of retailers wanting to do like promotional studies, where if they're doing a partnership with another retailer, or they're partnering with like a gym to drive traffic to their store, like they want to now have a system where everyone opts in. And so, like, let's say, and these are not our clients, so I'll bring them up because they don't have anything to do with our business, but like an Equinox, for example, with a salad chain, for an example, like similar companies to those have wanted to do partnerships where they would share data, and that way the salad chain could learn if Equinox customers had a bigger impact on that business than someone who's not an Equinox customer. So it was like really interesting to start to uncover that, but it would be something we would only do if both companies actually opted in, you know. So there's some things I think around benchmarking and starting to provide like cross store engagement that I think there's just so much interesting data in there that just is how you handle it, and like, you know, creating that opt-in versus opt-out policy.
Right.
So.
Right. And what about from a Google perspective? You know, Wes mentioned like 12 to 18 months. That seems like a pretty short period of time. Are you guys seeing similar when you launched Google Now, and that was kind of, you know, almost anticipating, or is anticipating, what I'm going to search for? A little bit of a, you know, for me, I loved it, but for some people it might be a little bit disheartening. Have you seen similar types of 12 to 18 months, or even shorter than that?
Well, you know, part of it is, as Wes was saying, people not understanding how the data is used.
Right.
And there's sort of a vision of a guy at a computer going, oh, she searched for that, you know, and you know, that isn't happening. But the other part is that while we take, I have to say the line, we take privacy extremely seriously, and our approach to it is that it's always in your hands what you want to share. That said, personally, I've always believed this goes kind of inexorably in one direction because of the value proposition. Mm-hmm. So I had left my house. Well, a couple of things happened. The evening before, I knew I was driving somewhere, and I looked it up on my computer, and I was logged into Chrome, and I looked up the address to check the route, and I thought, okay, that makes sense. And I went to bed, got up in the morning, got in the car, opened my phone to get the navigation, and the phone suggested that route. So I didn't have to type any of the address or even speak any of the address in. It could do that because I allowed Google to know it was me on both those platforms. That was an upside to me. I checked the traffic information, and it was green all the way where I was going, and I got halfway there, and there had been an accident in between my leaving the house, and literally the traffic was stopped. And because it was stopped, I felt okay taking out my phone behind the wheel, and I checked and I saw it was red for miles. Yeah. And at that moment, I thought, this is how we should be explaining privacy concerns to people, because I know that I must get off the next exit and find another way to go, because through Waze, all these different drivers are sharing information about the speed at which they're going. It doesn't say Tim has come to a stop on, you know, I-95. It just aggregated this information, and we all benefited from that.
Yep.
So that's kind of the, you know, when I think about it, that's what I'm thinking about, is there'll be an inevitability of people seeing, boy, I get so much, why wouldn't I? And by the way, the other side of that is people aren't doing creepy, ugly things with my data.
Yep.
So that we have to keep doing that. But assuming that's solid, the more we prove that it's worth it, the more this will just be easy for people.
It's like technology is a force for good in the world. And that's a really, really powerful point. And so do you see that as being what's next?
Yeah, I definitely do. One, like you were saying before, I think it's the predictive piece that technology is really going to enable. One of the things that we've seen is we can determine, you know, based off of your electricity usage, when your AC unit is actually going to go out based on the usage curve. So being a consumer and someone who has a house and knows how much an AC unit costs, if you could tell me a couple months ahead of time, hey, your AC unit's about to go out, make sure you watch it, and you might want to prepare and start saving now, then it feels like a force for good, and the usage of that data becomes positive to the user, and then they don't mind it as much. So I feel like you said before, Tim, as long as the value proposition is positive, and as long as it improves people's lives, and it's not intrusive, then I think consumers are going to be more apt to give up more access to their information.
Yeah, I think there's also a big evolution coming in how we collect data and what that conversation is between, let's say, a publisher and an end user, and what that exchange of information looks like. You know, we tend to skew and think about things in sort of the term of gamification. Like, how can we make an end user comfortable sharing data with us, and bringing that forward, but also do it in a way that's fun and entertaining, and they feel a connection there? Because what we see from our research is the more people feel connected to the value proposition that the gentleman spoke of earlier, the more willing they are to share that information and the more value that they see in the end result of that.
Yep.
So I think you know, you start to see a lot of companies that have no sort of interest in gaming as a business model, but they're leveraging principles of gamification in their marketing plans, in their data collection plans, in the way that they're having conversations with a prospective customer. And all of that starts to build an emotional connection. And that's how you get loyalty, and that's how you get repeat customers, and that's how you get evangelists for your products. And so, you know, we do a lot of experimentation around that. Like, if we need to collect a certain level of PII to enhance an end user experience, how do we do that in a way that the end user finds value in even giving you that information, right? And that experience is entertaining and connected to what they see at the very end of that, whether it be a recommendation or a new feature or what have you. So I'm really excited to see that sort of spread across a number of different industries, because I think often, you know, it's usually just a form, and you're like, hey, fill out this form and give me all this really personal and intimate data about yourself, and that alone just freaks people out.
Right.
But if you can make that entertaining and fun, you'd be amazed at the level of detail that people are willing to share with you.
Fantastic. So the interesting thing to me is that what we've been talking about today and right now so far has been stuff that's all possible now. So what's the big thing for the future? What's going to happen tomorrow?
Have you seen the Jetsons?
Well, you know, that's actually, it's funny you say the Jetsons, because I've long believed that, you know, predictions of the future are consistently grandiose,
Right.
and consistently wrong. You know, if you watched any science fiction from the 60s, you know, we all would have arrived here today by jetpack.
Yes.
You know, and that wouldn't be extraordinary because everyone would have come in a jetpack. And you know, the truth is, if you think about it, jetpacks are just not that revolutionary. I mean, it's spectacular looking, but we would still be commuting and all of that stuff. By contrast, email would have made a terrible movie. You know, but it has profoundly changed our lives.
Yeah.
So when we think about what's coming, I think it helps to think about principles like the friction idea, like an inexorable march toward openness of data, because what will really change is subtle and profound. It's the little things that are, you know, what is email? Email is an increased efficiency of something we did anyway.
Yep.
It's communication. So when you think about where we're going to go, it helps to think about these big baskets and big principles about people will need to communicate, people will need to conduct commerce, they will need to be entertained, they will need to manage their households, and you know. And they will want to do this with less and less and less friction. In my stump speech for the past year, I've used a chart that I borrowed from a business school professor who, God bless him, posted it online, and it was plotting devices by the frequency of your proximity to them and how many things they did for you. And in the lower left-hand corner was your landline telephone, because it only does one thing and you're only with it once in a while, and that's why I would guess a majority of you have disconnected your landline phone, right? Your desktop computer is up here. It does a lot of things, but you're only with it sometimes. So quickly, a laptop computer was better because you could be with it more than time. Mm-hmm. And the punchline of the whole thing is, as you map, your SLR camera to your digital camera to your game, device that you carry around with you, everything moves up and to the right. And in that upper right-hand corner is your mobile phone. Because people will trade that convenience, that omnipresence, for a lot of other things. You could do the same thing with the history of the iPod. That it used to be the size of a pack of cigarettes, and it got smaller and smaller and smaller until it got to the point that it was the size of a matchbook, and then it disappeared. You don't need one because it's inside your phone. And that's the trade-off that consumers will consistently make. So bringing it full circle, I think, I'm still not answering your question, but I'm giving you a framework for how to think about it, which is those will be the trade-offs that consumers will make. Mobility, convenience, simplicity, lack of friction. That's what the future is going to look like.
Great. Anyone else?
Well, you pretty much covered it. I mean, just to build off of that, I think, again, well said. I think of it as an intelligence in a deviceless world, right? And the point of friction, I think, articulates it well. It's that sort of omnipresent ability to access intelligence, store intelligence, and regardless of what the experience is, and do that with less and less devices and sort of interfaces that are unique or require unique sort of directional learning and what have you. To me, that's an exciting future. To me, that's revolutionary when you walk into a space and you can have an experience and you don't see a TV, you don't have a remote control in your hand, you don't have a controller, you don't even have any type of wearable. It's technology and intelligence is in everything. Mm-hmm. And that's a future I'm excited about, because then you can start to take all of this intelligence and this sort of omnipresent moment and you can start to shape it at your discretion. Right now, the discretion is still dictated by the developer of the device or the software or what have you. To me, that ubiquitous open platform is one that hosts and can contain all of this intelligence, and then I get to decide how I want to use it. Right. I get to manipulate it, I get to direct it, and I get to decide exactly what it does for me as an end user, and also how I share that with other people, regardless if they're in the same environment as me or halfway across the world. So I think it does all come back to friction. Mm-hmm. And continuing to innovate in a way that removes all that friction. I mean, friction just comes in so many different forms. It's language barriers, it's technological barriers, et cetera. But a lot of the infrastructure is being built today to remove all of that stuff. Yep. And the cloud is a big piece of that. Connected devices are a stepping stone towards that. Mm-hmm. But I'm excited about when we remove the word device.
Absolutely.
Right.
We're going to leave here trading our spiel, because I love that idea, the deviceless idea and technology getting out of the way.
I think we should go start a company together. And we'll figure that out.
Well, bring Mark, because they're already there. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
Yeah. Well, outside of the briefcase car, flying car that I'm sure Google's working on right now, the frictionless, I definitely feel that's where it's moving towards. The other piece, which some of my colleagues have been talking about, the other aspect of it that I definitely see that will probably happen, not today or tomorrow, but probably 10 years from now, is some level of wireless electricity. The frictionless world doesn't happen without being tethered to a cord to the wall, right. Yeah. But it does happen when you don't have to rely on electricity being tethered to the wall. Mm-hmm. So
I need that now.
When wireless electricity occurs, and there are a lot of different startups that are working on it, and other people who are working on it. But I think that's going to be one piece that you will see probably 10 years from now, and it's going to be something like, well, why didn't that happen before? Yeah.
Yep.
Great point.
What about in the in-store experience?
I was getting so wrapped up in everything else. I think the retail experience changes naturally just because I think every store becomes a showroom and just is not, like you can transact wherever you want, anywhere you want, across any device. Like you put something in your basket online, you can take it in store and check out. Same thing in the store, you put something in your basket in store, check out online on your mobile device. There's no boundaries anymore. But I think what's even more exciting than that, particularly for retail, is just the the Bitcoin stuff. I think is super interesting. Like similar to the boundaries and friction. Like there's no friction between governments anymore. There's no friction between languages anymore. Like you can now 3D print anything in your home. Or at your dentist. Like I went to the dentist a couple of weeks ago, and I had to get like a crown replaced, and they printed out my crown. Like it was insane.
Wow.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
So that's the kind of stuff where I imagine a world where you're literally just getting emailed like a recipe for a 3D printing recipe, and if you want a hamburger, like you're just printing out your hamburger like in Star Trek, or you're just printing out like anything, like a new key for your house. I can just see all that happening where you don't have to move at all. It's
That's
crazy.
my favorite statistic about 3D printers is that 3D printers now have the capability of printing 80% of the parts of 3D printers.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, but yeah.
Thanks,
Almost
guys.
there.
We have
Almost there.
a little bit of time. Does anybody have any questions from the group?
We have a question from Twitter.
Oh, fantastic.
So this is for Donnie at Xbox. How is augmented reality changing the gaming model, and are brands already planning for integration opportunities?
Wow, that's a really great question. So this to me is sort of, again, a step function into this sort of more frictionless world. You will probably likely still have to have some device, and I think Oculus Rift, the most prominent sort of name out there right now, at least commercially. I still think there's a big barrier there for people. You got to put this thing on your head. I've put one on. I've experienced it. It's really, really cool technology. It's still in its infancy, but the fact that I have to put this on, to me, is a pretty huge barrier for a lot of people now. It's not going to mess up my hairstyle, but there are a lot of people that may, just that alone, having something on your face might feel a little claustrophobic. But I think the idea of creating worlds and being able to manipulate them, as I was speaking about before, I think that's the first step of getting there. There are several brands that are already playing in that space. There's a lot of brands that are already experimenting in the virtual reality space. I think this goes back to the question you asked earlier about like, when do you get in? Get in now. Help define the future. Help stress test the models these guys are creating. You don't want them to get too far down the road and start sort of getting entrenched in certain technologies and approaches where they won't work for brands, and then for them to unpack that, unravel it, and recreate it is going to take a long time.
Yep.
And folks that are sitting in this room, as well as many of your colleagues, you guys are going to be the ones that help steer that, but only if you participate. So I would encourage you to participate now, get in early, as we said prior, get in there, fail fast, learn, demand the things that you need and that your customers need so that we can make this technology work. Because if we can show that it works, then you will see that progression accelerate very, very quickly. If we start to have a lot of missteps and people are kind of just doing it off on their own, it'll take the technology a really long time to sort of evolve.
We have another question from Twitter.
All right, of course, it's a technology session.
How will technology change social media in the near term?
I used to work in social media. I was at a company called Buddy Media for 2.5 years. I feel like social media will stop existing as it is. Like I think social media will stop being a noun. It'll just be like there'll be a social element to every single thing we do. So I think that's probably the biggest change that's already starting to happen with some of these next generation platforms, that are just becoming more content creation platforms and just content licensing for like Getty images and things like that. So I think that ultimately, if you're doing a campaign and it doesn't have a social element to it, then you're doing it wrong.
There's a platform element to it as well, which is, if you think about it, it's really surprising how successful social media was ahead of mobile. because it's changed dramatically by being able to be social in the moment. Amplify the things you're doing in the moment instead of going out and doing things and going back to your computer and reporting on it. Which now, the mobile component has become so ingrained in the social aspect that, I don't know about the rest of you, but I feel disingenuous if I'm doing it on my laptop because I'm now, you know, well, it's not really real time, you know, for me to say about what I did last night. You know? But that speaks to everything we've been talking about the continuous, ubiquitous nature of technology. So thinking about how advances in technology will affect social, I think that same stuff applies, that you know, as Wes was saying, it's just going to flow. It's no longer going to require a second thought, a second, well, now I'm being social. It's just part of how consumers behave and how brands behave. Ooh, their hands.
Yeah, Jack.
Hello. So the social thing. I once read, it was not long after Facebook started to, you know, take off, and a longtime marketing guy said, I don't need to have a relationship with Tide, I just needed to clean my clothes. and I believe that. I think it's we overshare. But if my Whirlpool washing machine told me I repeatedly used a little bit too much Tide and I didn't need to use warm water and used more cold and I saved this much energy, and I love the idea where you tell me on my TV that I got to change, put the clothes in the dryer. Now, that would be cool. And then if someone could benefit from my knowledge socially from my energy savings, there's a sort of a value chain, but me getting cozy with Tide serves absolutely no purpose. So how do we get, you know, use social, I guess, in a more meaningful and valuable way in something like that? I don't know how we get there, but that chain makes sense to me.
Was that a statement or a question? I'm sorry.
I think you have to think about authenticity. The example that always comes to mind for me is, I don't want to get joke of the day from Fidelity. You know, you're managing my money. If you happen to be funny, that's terrific. But I'd like to know that you're competent. You know. So in the same way, you know, a forced relationship with my detergent is probably not huge, but it's on the marketing people at Tide to determine, you know, how can I actually have a valuable relationship with you, and should it be related to, let's talk about, you know, your clothes are ready, or you're using too much detergent.
I like sorry, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, I understand where you're going with your comment. I think from a social perspective, when you focus on making a good product, to me the social aspect is enabled. When you force a conversation, then it's inauthentic, as Tim pointed out. So I think as marketers, I think if we focus on the product and making a good product and a good experience for the customer, social will happen automatically, because most people are happy to evangelize a positive experience. And they're also very happy to evangelize a negative experience, which in the electricity sector, they will do that quite frequently when their lights don't work because they decide not to pay the bill. But, but that is, I think as marketers, our focus should be on the product and then figure out how to enable a conversation to happen versus making a conversation happen.
I like what Lee said yesterday on the panel where, I forget the specific example he brought up, but I think the Tide point illustrates it well. No one wants to have that social relationship with Tide, the soap, but if Tide has subject matter expertise that will help me, like in cleaning clothes or getting a stain out or something like that, that's actually information I care about. That's information that's going to improve my life and help me. And that's a relationship I might be willing to be open to with Tide. Tide just wanting to have a relationship with me because they want to show me their new box or they reformulated, you know, their product, probably not something I'm super interested in. But I think it's more and more, it's about the subject matter expertise that product can represent. And I think brands are starting to really get that. And I think content creation has forced them to do that, because creating vignettes about Tide and what have you, again, no one's going to watch that. Creating vignettes that show how all of Tide's expertise and all the science that they have at their sort of disposal around the idea of cleaning, and then packaging that up in a way that is very, very relevant to all of us and what we do in our day-to-day lives, I think that's valuable. So I think it's just sort of repositioning, putting the product to the side, and it's kind of what are the underpinnings of that product and what is it really trying to achieve and what's the value proposition, bringing those things forward and doing that in an entertaining way, that's when you get people to lean forward. Mm-hmm. Great question, though.
Sam?
Yep.
I'm going to use my technology back here to cut you guys off. We're running a little bit over.
Yeah, we're a little bit over time, but yeah. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.